Thank you, Ravi, and Sunil and Raman. Thank you for including me in your panel. We talk about VUCA, and as this was being talked about, I realized, and the realization occurred just in the moment to me, that the way to handle this volatility is to have a strong anchor inside the organization. Change is always with reference to something which is changeless. And the changeless part of an organization are the values and the vision in action. So if our values are strong, I learned from my teacher that when we live values, they become virtues. And virtues of an organization are the real wealth of an organization. The only way to handle volatility is to have strong values in action. So the vision comes alive, and that becomes the real wealth of the company. The only way to handle uncertainty is to really understand the fact that we must understand truly the voices of all stakeholders. Many years back at the American Chamber of Commerce breakfast meeting in Chicago, I was there with my friends, with the CEO of A.T. Kearney. We used to have a partnership with Kearney in India. And at that time, I met Bob Galvin of Motorola. And Bob mentioned something very interesting in that session, in a meeting like this. He said, here is what I mean by understanding stakeholders and customers. He said, I tell my team in Motorola, if you're in a meeting and something is being discussed and you do not hear the word customer mentioned in the meeting, raise your hand and say, how does this have to do anything with customers? Whether it's a new accounting system, a new shared services platform, whatever we are creating, what does it have to do with customer? And he said, if you find there is no connection between what we are discussing and the customer, you have the permission to leave the meeting. It doesn't matter whether you are discussing a new performance management system, you are discussing anything, a new strategic planning process, anything. If you don't understand how it adds value to your customer, you have a right to leave the meeting. And I think I really remember that. A few weeks later, I went to meet Harley Davidson at Milwaukee, and Ron Hutchinson, who was the global head of quality and all this transformation of Harley, he came to pick me up from the airport, and on the way we were talking about Harley, and he gave me a very interesting story. He said, one of the things they did in Harley was to reduce the number of suppliers, improve qualities, set up partnerships, and they removed the entire material accounting department completely because they felt that this department is no longer required, because if you trust your suppliers and if they are supplying to you parts and so many vehicles are being sold, it means that much material has been supplied. So it's very interesting that to understand, to tackle uncertainty, you really need a deep understanding of your customer and trust your suppliers and build that kind of understanding, then you can certainly take care of this uncertainty. Third, to handle complexity. I think to handle complexity, we teach in our school a whole course on what is called whole systems thinking. How are different forces and variables interconnected? I think before you do any kind of process management exercise, one needs to understand from a holistic point of view what one improvement in one part of the organization, what impact it would have on another. Sometimes by reducing costs somewhere, we might actually create a problem somewhere else. So this business of tackling complexity is really having the competence of whole systems thinking. And because variables get interconnected a lot, I think we need especially also not just deep competence in whole systems, but also the deep commitment to follow that. Lastly, to handle ambiguity, I think the only way I have understood for all of us to handle ambiguity is to have the practice of mindfulness. What is meant by that is to be having the full attentiveness to pay attention. When things are very ambiguous, we really need to be fully present, and organizations need that capability of mindfulness in the age of distraction. Most of our leaders are not fully present, and thanks to technology and thanks to 4 generations working together at the same time in an organization, we find that the young people of today learn in completely different ways from some of us. First. And so the attention spans have gone down. Any kind of initiative inside a company to be improved, when you're working with multi-generational teams, you really have to consciously teach yourself and teach all the team members the practice of mindfulness. So these 5 things, the fact that there is vision and values and there is sustainability that comes out of that, that is the one which really, that sustainability can take care of volatility, and the anchor is always in values. Uncertainty can be understood through deep understanding of all our customers and what they truly require. Complexity can be really handled with whole system thinking competence and understanding that there is some diversity to handle that. And finally, the ambiguity can be handled through this. Having said this, now let me come to the key leadership roles in leading a process like this. I think the first question we must ask in an organization, why are we doing this? What's the real agenda? Is this only to drive costs down? Is it to improve customer value? Is it to improve employee value? For instance, if we do shared services for HR, for example, and there are companies here sitting here who have actually done that, the only test that this should finally rest in is it making our employees happy? You know, in the 80s, we were studying employee satisfaction. In the 90s, we were chasing employee engagement. The latest concept worldwide is employee happiness. And happiness is not created just by improving transactions. It comes out of anything making life simple and also truly giving employees the feeling that whatever has been done is actually making my life happier, is making me feel very much more contented with what I have in the company, and I really trust the company. And I think, therefore, I'm just giving that example. Similarly, if we are trying to do something to serve our customers better, that's what ultimately this should lead to say customers really feel happy. We used to talk about customer satisfaction. We moved to customer delight, which was a dangerous concept because companies went out of business trying to delight customers. And I think after that, we tried to understand this, that there is a balance. Customers are really happy if you walk your talk, you do what you promise. They don't want you to do something beyond your promises, but you must be trustworthy. You must build their affection. And the customers would love you if you're open, transparent, and make sure your processes really treat customers well. I think in envisioning this whole thing, therefore, leaders must understand why are we doing this. And I think, therefore, there's a need to create a shared vision in the organization. This is not about 5 people sitting together in the corporate office and say, we must drive cost reduction in the company, and so we do business process management. The case for getting people involved into truly, I remember when we were doing this work with American Express and it was happening in Brighton in the UK, I think there was a lot of anxiety in the people there because jobs were going away to India. And I think one of the things that the leadership team, we urge them to do is to really create a shared understanding of why are we doing this. I think in this respect, there are many methodologies available on how to create that sense of shared vision behind any improvement. And I love the concept of design teams. Before you begin any change, pick up a design team that is a true microcosm of the organization that we are trying to change. If you're trying to impact a certain part of the organization, pick up representatives from that organization at different levels, different locations, different functions, and even different attitudes. Have in the design team cynics as well as people who are optimists. So when you design change in a design team, implementing it becomes very much easier. The second part is with the design team preparing the soil, as we call it, which means starting the new conversation on what will happen at the end of this whole transformation, getting people excited about how they are going to use their strengths to do that. So encouraging people to have dialogue on when were we at our best, what has made us do our best, and how can we use the power of that to transform the company. In other words, the whole approach of appreciative inquiry, discover people at their best through appreciative dialogue, make them dream about the possibility of what lies at the end of this process transformation, make them design change together with clear-cut understanding of what improvements are required, and finally, get them to deliver it in a way that actually gets them to work together and give of their best. The second part is, once we have prepared the soil, really getting people together to say, when we do the shared vision and planning for this whole exercise, We must make sure that every single part of the organization that is impacted by change welcomes this. And therefore, the process of communication. In fact, the people who lead this exercise inside the company, you can imagine if an organization is like a typical pyramid with the CEO at the top. In this process of transformation, you are reversing the pyramid and putting the customer on top and the CEO at the bottom. And when you see these two pyramids, one, the traditional management pyramid of planning, organizing, and controlling change, the other pyramid of the vision, values, and empowerment, which is of inspiring people for the change, which is what we call leadership. Both of them have to be done together. And to do that, if you can visualize in your mind the two triangles, the typical pyramid like this, and the inverted pyramid on top of that, it becomes like a star. And there are 6 points to the star that I want to talk about towards the end of my conversation here, which is that a critical role for leadership is to encourage dialogue across differences. This is a special quality and a gift. How do you get people into the room to have dialogue across differences? 2, how do you get people to take responsibility by coaching people who require to be changed? Because all process changes require behavioral change, mindset change. Therefore, you have to make transformation coaches inside your company who really help people who are going to go through this kind of change. So take responsibility for that. 3, a lot of new capability requires to be built. And I want to single out one mistake I have seen many of our clients and we ourselves make over. There are people required to design change who are great thinkers. There are people who are required to bring alignment in the company who have great emotional intelligence and teaming skills. And there are some people extremely good in execution and operations. When we manage this whole change process, we have to make sure that the teams we are setting up, we don't make sure that only the people with good people skills are, for example, at the thinking stage, or people with great thinkers are given responsibility for bringing alignment amongst people, and actual execution is done with people with that capability. So designing teams and putting the right people in charge of the right initiatives is extraordinarily important. Lastly, I just want to say that in this whole process of putting the right teams in place, I think finally I just want to end by saying in any kind of transformation and change, the role of a leader is not just to be there, completely transparent, open, and answering all questions, but making sure that the biggest thing for sponsorship of this change are the 3 R's. Recognition, more recognition, and even more recognition, which is to make sure that as people actually make improvements, you take the time to celebrate success with them and make sure everybody gets involved. That adds a lot of value to this whole exercise. So these are just some of my thoughts I thought I'll just share with you, and I wish you all the very best, and I'm sure you are now about to hear, as they say, the father of the BPO movement, Raman. And so thank you for listening to me this morning. Yes.